The plane lurched to a sudden stop on the runway. Every passenger felt it. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, sharp and final. This flight has been grounded by executive order. Loretta Hayes clutched her 7-year-old daughter Sage against her chest. The child's body had just stopped convulsing moments earlier, her lips still pale, her breathing shallow. On the floor between the seats lay the crushed remains of Sage's medication, ground into white powder under the heel of flight attendant Bethany Whitmore's polished shoe. Bethany stood 3 rows up, arms crossed, a tight smile of satisfaction on her face. Around them, passengers whispered and stared. Some pulled out phones. Others looked away, uncomfortable witnesses to what had just unfolded. Then the cockpit door opened. A tall black man in an expensive suit stepped into the cabin, his face a mask of cold fury. "Someone want to explain," he said, his voice cutting through the cabin like a blade, "why my daughters are in tears." Loretta's head snapped up. Her breath caught. That voice. Those eyes. Theodore Hayes. Her husband. The man she thought was in meetings across the country. The CEO of Horizon Atlantic Airlines. The most powerful person on this aircraft. And he had just walked out of the cockpit to find his family destroyed. Before we dive into how this nightmare began, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Are you Team Loretta or do you think there's more to this story? Hit that like button if you believe no mother should ever have to fight this hard for her child's safety, and subscribe because what happens next will leave you speechless. Trust me, you do not want to miss how this flight attendant's world comes crashing down. Now, let's rewind and see exactly how we got to this moment of absolute reckoning. The alarm buzzed at 5 in the morning in the Hayes household in Atlanta's upscale Buckhead neighborhood. Loretta dragged herself out of bed, her mind already running through the checklist for the day. She was a senior software engineer at a major tech firm, and this trip to Los Angeles was not optional. A critical client presentation, 3 days of meetings, and she had to be there. Normally, Theo would watch the girls. But he had called 2 nights ago, his voice apologetic. "Big meeting, love. Can't get out of it. I'm so sorry." So Loretta made the decision every working mother dreads. She would take Sage and Willow with her. 7-year-old twins, bright and beautiful, but Sage carried a weight that most children never knew. Epilepsy. Diagnosed at age 4, mostly controlled with medication, but the seizures could still break through if she missed even 1 dose. Loretta moved through the house quietly, packing with the precision of someone who had done this 100 times. She laid out the girls' favorite travel outfits, checked and double-checked their backpacks, and then turned her attention to the most important item of all. The pill bottle. Clear plastic, pharmacy label affixed to the front. Sage's full name, the prescribing doctor's information, the medication name, dosage instructions, everything official and proper. 2 pills for the flight, carefully placed in a smaller travel container that fit in Loretta's purse. She held it up to the light, reading the label one more time, as if the words might change. They never did. Sage wandered into the kitchen rubbing sleep from her eyes, her twin sister Willow bouncing behind her with enough energy for both of them. "Mommy, are we really going on a plane?" Willow asked, practically vibrating with excitement. Sage was quieter, more reserved, her fingers twisting together the way they always did when she was nervous. "Mommy, what if I get sick on the plane?" Loretta knelt down and pulled both girls into her arms, breathing in the scent of their shampoo, feeling the solid warmth of their small bodies. "You won't get sick, baby. Mommy has your medicine right here. See?" She showed Sage the bottle. "We'll take it right on time, just like always. You're going to be perfectly fine." Sage nodded, but her eyes still held that shadow of worry. She had learned too young what it felt like when her body betrayed her, when the world went dark and her muscles stopped obeying her commands. Loretta kissed her forehead. "I promise, sweetheart. Mommy's got you." The drive to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport took 40 minutes in early morning traffic. Loretta parked in long-term parking, hefted both their suitcases, and herded the girls toward the terminal. Inside, the airport hummed with pre-dawn travelers, the smell of coffee and cleaning solution mixing in the recycled air. Security was the first test. Loretta placed her purse in a bin, watching as it rolled through the X-ray machine. A TSA agent, a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes, pulled the bin aside. "Ma'am, I need to check your bag." Loretta's stomach tightened, but she nodded. The agent pulled out the pill bottle, examined it, then looked at Sage standing beside Loretta. "Your daughter?" "Yes. She has epilepsy. That's her prescribed medication." The agent's expression softened immediately. "My nephew has the same condition." "You're doing good, Mama. Let me just verify this real quick." She scanned the label, nodded, and handed it back. "You're all set. Safe travels." Loretta exhaled, relief flooding through her. That was the reaction she expected. Professional, compassionate, human. If only she had known that not everyone on this journey would show her the same courtesy. They boarded the plane at gate B-17, Loretta's boarding pass reading 12A, 12B, 12C, middle of the cabin, economy class, nothing fancy but functional. Willow skipped down the aisle, her light-up sneakers flashing with each step. Sage held Loretta's hand, her grip tight. They found their row and settled in, Loretta in the middle seat with Sage by the window and Willow on the aisle. Around them, other passengers stowed bags and settled into seats. A white couple in first class laughed loudly as a flight attendant poured them champagne. A businessman in row 11 didn't even look up from his laptop. And then Bethany Whitmore appeared. Blonde hair pulled back into a severe bun, makeup perfect, uniform crisp as fresh paper. She moved down the aisle with practiced efficiency, greeting passengers with a smile that seemed painted on. When she reached the White family in row 10, her voice warmed. "Good morning. Are you folks heading to LA for vacation?" They chatted briefly, Bethany laughing at something the husband said. Then she turned to Loretta's row. The smile remained, but something in her eyes changed. Cooled. "Welcome aboard," she said, her tone flat, professional in the way that means nothing personal is being offered. Loretta nodded. "Thank you." Bethany's gaze flicked over the three of them, lingering for just a moment too long, then she moved on without another word. Loretta felt it, that familiar prickle at the back of her neck. The assessment. The judgment. She had felt it her entire life, that moment when someone looked at her and made assumptions based on nothing but the color of her skin. She pushed the feeling down, turned to her daughters. "You girls comfortable?" Sage nodded, pressing her face against the window. Willow was already pulling out her tablet. "Can I play games, Mommy?" "Once we're in the air, baby." The plane began to taxi, engines thrumming to life. Loretta closed her eyes and sent up a silent prayer. "Just let this flight be smooth. Let us get to LA without incident. Let my daughter be safe." She did not know that in 3 hours, that prayer would be tested in ways she could never have imagined. 45 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers stirred, some heading to the bathroom, others pulling out snacks. Loretta glanced at her watch. It was time. Sage's medication needed to be taken every 8 hours, and they were right at the edge of that window. Sage had already started showing the telltale signs. Her hand kept going to her temple, her face scrunching in discomfort. "Mommy, my head hurts," she whispered. Loretta's heart clenched. "I know, baby. Let's get you your medicine, okay?" She reached for the call button above her seat and pressed it. A soft chime sounded. Willow looked over, concern creasing her small forehead. "Is Sage okay?" "She will be. Just needs her pill." They waited. 1 minute. 2. Finally, Bethany appeared, her expression mildly annoyed. "Yes." Loretta kept her voice calm, polite. "Excuse me, could I get a cup of water, please? My daughter needs to take her medication." Bethany's eyes narrowed slightly. She looked at Sage, then back at Loretta. "What kind of medication?" The question hung in the air, sharp-edged. Loretta felt the shift, the sudden tension. It's anti-seizure medication. My daughter has epilepsy. It's prescribed by her doctor. Bethany crossed her arms. I'll need to see documentation. Loretta blinked. Documentation? It's in a prescription bottle with her name on it. It went through security. That's security, Bethany said, her voice taking on a harder edge. This is my cabin. I'm responsible for passenger safety, and FAA regulations require verification of all medications administered during flight. Loretta's pulse quickened. She had flown dozens of times with Sage's medication. No one had ever asked for documentation beyond what was already on the bottle. The bottle has all the documentation you need. Her name, the doctor's name, the pharmacy, the dosage. Everything is right there. Bethany did not move. I need to verify it. How exactly do you want to verify it? Bethany's jaw tightened. That's not your concern. If you can't provide additional documentation, I can't allow the administration of unverified substances on this aircraft. Unverified substances. The words landed like a slap. Loretta stared at her, disbelief morphing into anger. Are you serious right now? This is a child's prescription medication. I don't make the rules, ma'am. Then show me the rule. Show me where it says I can't give my daughter her prescribed medication. Bethany's face flushed. I don't have to show you anything. I'm telling you the policy. Around them, passengers were starting to notice. A white man in row 11 turned to look, his expression annoyed. A woman across the aisle whispered to her companion. Sage began to cry softly, her hands pressed to her head. Mommy, it hurts. Willow grabbed her sister's hand. It's okay, Sage. Mommy's getting your medicine. But Mommy was not getting the medicine. Mommy was standing in the aisle now, her voice rising despite her best efforts to stay calm. My daughter is in pain. She needs this medication. Are you really going to stand there and tell me I can't help my own child? Bethany took a step back, her hand moving to the small radio clip to her belt. Ma'am, if you don't lower your voice, I'll have to involve the captain. Involve the captain. Yes, please do that. Maybe someone with sense can explain to me why a mother can't give her sick child prescribed medication. Bethany's hand was on the radio now, her finger hovering over the button. Sit down, ma'am. Now. Loretta wanted to scream. She wanted to grab the woman by her crisp uniform and shake her until she saw reason. But she had two daughters watching, one of them in pain, and she knew that any escalation could end with security, with police, with her children traumatized even further. So she sat down, her hands shaking, her throat tight with unshed tears. Bethany turned and walked away without another word, leaving Loretta sitting there with her daughter's medication in her hand and no water to give it with. Sage leaned against her, whimpering. Mommy, please. I know, baby. I know. Loretta looked around the cabin, searching for an ally, for anyone who might see the insanity of what was happening. Most people had turned away, uncomfortable, unwilling to get involved. A black man several rows back met her eyes, his face tight with anger, but he said nothing. Not yet. Loretta pulled Sage close and whispered, Hold on, sweetheart. Just hold on. 15 minutes crawled by. Sage's pain was worsening. Loretta could see it in the way her daughter's eyes squeezed shut, the way her breathing had become shallow and quick. This was the pattern. First the headache, then the aura, then the seizure. They had maybe 10 minutes before Sage's body betrayed her again. Loretta made a decision. She pulled out a bottle of water from her own carry-on bag, one she had purchased at the airport before boarding. She unscrewed the cap quietly, then reached for the pill bottle in her purse. If Bethany would not help, Loretta would do this herself. Sage needed the medication, and Loretta was her mother. That had to count for something. She had just gotten the bottle open, was shaking one small white pill into her palm, when Bethany reappeared. Her eyes locked onto Loretta's hand, onto the pill, and her face transformed into something cold and furious. "What do you think you're doing?" Loretta looked up, forcing her voice to stay level. "I'm giving my daughter her medication. You left me no choice. Put that away. Now." "No." The word came out stronger than Loretta felt. "My daughter is in pain. She needs this pill. I'm her mother, and I'm giving it to her." Bethany moved fast. She reached across Sage, her hand shooting out to grab the pill bottle from Loretta's hand. Loretta jerked back, but Bethany's fingers caught the edge of the bottle. "Let go," Loretta said, her voice sharp. "Give it back." They struggled for a moment, both gripping the small plastic container, and then it happened. The bottle slipped from both their hands. It tumbled through the air, hit the armrest, and 2 pills spilled out onto the narrow floor between the seats. Loretta lunged for them, but Bethany was faster. In a move that Loretta would replay in her mind for years afterward, Bethany stepped forward, her polished black shoe coming down directly on top of the 2 white pills. She ground her heel into them, crushing them into powder against the industrial carpet. The sound was nothing. A small crunch, barely audible over the hum of the plane's engines. But to Loretta, it was deafening. She stared at the white powder smeared across the floor, at the shattered remnants of her daughter's medication, and for a moment she could not breathe. Could not think. Could not process what had just happened. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, what did you do?" Bethany stepped back, her face flushed but her voice steady. "I warned you. Unverified medications will not be administered on my flight. Those were my daughter's pills. That was her medication." Loretta's voice broke. "How could you? How could you do that?" Bethany turned to walk away. Loretta shot to her feet, grabbing the woman's arm. "You don't get to walk away. You just destroyed my daughter's medication. Do you understand what you've done?" Bethany yanked her arm free. "Take your hands off me, or I will have you arrested for assault." And then Sage began to seize. It started with a small tremor in her hands, so slight that at first Willow did not notice. Then Sage's eyes rolled back, the whites showing, and her small body went rigid. Willow screamed. "Sage! Mommy, Sage is shaking." Loretta whirled around, her heart stopping. She dropped to her knees, pulling Sage's rigid body toward her, cradling her daughter's head as the seizure took hold. "No, no, no, baby, no. It's okay. Mommy's here. I'm here." Sage's arms jerked, her legs kicking against the seat in front of her. The passenger there, a white woman in her 50s, turned around and gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Around them, people were standing now, some moving closer, others pressing back, uncertain and frightened. A man's voice called out. "Does someone need a doctor? Is there a doctor on board?" Bethany stood frozen, her face pale, watching the scene unfold. Another flight attendant, a younger woman with brown hair, rushed over. "Oh my God, what happened?" Loretta looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. "She has epilepsy. She needed her medication. That woman," she pointed at Bethany, her fingers shaking, "that woman destroyed it. And now my baby is having a seizure because she refused to let me help her." The seizure lasted a minute and a half. To Loretta, it felt like an eternity. When it finally stopped, Sage went limp in her arms, her breathing shallow, her skin clammy with sweat. Loretta rocked her, whispering over and over, "You're okay. You're okay. Mommy's got you." Willow was sobbing, her small hands clutching at Loretta's sleeve. "Is she going to die, Mommy? Is Sage going to die?" "No, baby. No. She's going to be fine." But Loretta did not know if that was true. Without medication, Sage could have another seizure. And another. And if they kept coming, if her daughter went into status epilepticus, the consequences could be catastrophic. Brain damage. Permanent disability. Death. A black man from several rows back pushed his way forward. He was tall, in his 50s, with graying hair and eyes full of righteous anger. "What the hell just happened here?" he demanded, looking directly at Bethany. "Did you really just destroy that child's medication?" Bethany opened her mouth, but no words came out. Another passenger, a white woman with short gray hair and a nurse's badge clipped to her shirt, knelt down beside Loretta. "I'm Harriet. I'm a nurse. Let me check her." Loretta nodded, unable to speak. Harriet placed 2 fingers on Sage's wrist, counting her pulse, then leaned in to listen to her breathing. "Her pulse is elevated, but she's breathing." "How often does she have seizures?" "She's controlled with medication," Loretta managed. "She was supposed to take her pill 30 minutes ago. But it's gone. They destroyed it." Harriet's face hardened. She looked up at Bethany. "Is that true? Did you destroy this child's prescribed medication?" Bethany's jaw worked, but she said nothing. Harriet stood, her voice ringing out through the cabin. "This is criminal negligence. That child could have died." And still, the plane flew on. The aftermath of Sage's seizure left the cabin in a state of tense, uncomfortable silence. Loretta held her daughter close, Sage's small body limp and exhausted against her chest. Willow had not stopped crying, her face buried in Loretta's side. Around them, passengers whispered, their phones out, some recording, others texting, a few just staring. The black man who had spoken up earlier, whose name Loretta would later learn was Vernon Hayes, no relation, stood in the aisle with his phone raised. He was recording everything. "For the record," he said, his voice clear and steady, "I just watched a flight attendant destroy a child's prescribed medication and then stand by while that child had a seizure. This is being documented. This will not be swept under the rug." Bethany finally found her voice. "Sir, you need to sit down and turn off that device. You are disrupting this flight." Vernon did not move. "I'm disrupting the flight. A 7-year-old just had a seizure because you refused to let her mother give her medication. And you're telling me I'm the problem?" Harriet, the nurse, stepped between them. "She's right to document this. What happened here is medical negligence. If this child has another seizure, it could cause permanent brain damage. This flight needs to make an emergency landing. Now." Bethany's face flushed red. "We are not diverting this flight for a minor medical incident." "Minor?" Vernon's voice rose. "Are you out of your mind?" A white man in a business suit, sitting in row 13, turned around. "Look, I have an important meeting in LA. We can't delay the whole flight for one person." Vernon whipped his head around to face him. "One person? That's a child. A sick child whose medication was destroyed by airline staff. And you're worried about your meeting?" The businessman shrugged. "I'm just saying, these things happen. Maybe the mother should have had proper documentation." Loretta felt something inside her snap. She carefully passed Sage to Harriet, who held the sleeping child with practiced care, and then Loretta stood. She turned to face the businessman, her voice shaking with fury. "Proper documentation. My daughter's medication had her name, her doctor's name, the pharmacy, everything. It went through TSA without a single question. The only person who had a problem with it was her," she pointed at Bethany, "and the only reason she had a problem is because she looked at me, at my daughters, and decided we were a threat." The businessman looked uncomfortable. "I'm not saying it's about race." "Then what is it about?" Vernon cut in. "Because I've been flying for 30 years, and I have never once seen a flight attendant destroy a white child's medication." "Have you?" Silence. A woman across the aisle, white, middle-aged, spoke up quietly. "He's right. This is racial profiling. I saw the whole thing. That flight attendant was looking for a reason to target her from the moment she walked on this plane." Another voice, from the back. "I saw it too." She barely spoke to them, but she was all smiles with the white passengers in first class. Bethany's face went from red to white. "I was doing my job. I followed protocol." Show me the protocol, Vernon demanded. Show me in the FAA handbook where it says you can destroy a passenger's prescribed medication. Bethany opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. The lead flight attendant, a man named Gerald Patterson, finally emerged from the galley. He was white, in his 50s, with the kind of face that had seen it all and believed none of it was his problem. What's going on here? Loretta turned to him, desperation bleeding into her voice. Your flight attendant destroyed my daughter's medication. My daughter just had a seizure. We need to land this plane so she can get medical attention. Gerald's eyes swept over the scene, taking in Sage's limp form in Harriet's arms, Willow's tear-streaked face, Loretta's shaking hands. Then he looked at Bethany. Is this true? Bethany lifted her chin. I followed protocol, Gerald. The passenger refused to provide proper documentation for an unverified substance. It was a prescription pill bottle. Loretta shouted. With my daughter's name on it. Gerald held up a hand. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Calm down. Loretta felt hysterical laughter bubbling up in her throat. My child just had a seizure because your employee destroyed her medication, and you want me to calm down? We will file a report when we land, Gerald said, his tone dismissive. But we are not diverting this flight. We're less than an hour from Los Angeles. Your daughter will receive medical attention on the ground. Harriet stepped forward, still holding Sage. I'm a registered nurse with 28 years of experience. This child is at risk for status epilepticus. That means prolonged seizures that can cause permanent brain damage or death. She needs emergency medical intervention. You need to land this plane. Gerald's expression did not change. We've already passed the point of no return. Diverting now would cost the airline tens of thousands of dollars. The child is stable. We'll alert paramedics to meet us at LAX. Vernon raised his phone higher. You're all going to regret this. Every word you just said is being recorded. When this goes viral, and it will, you'll wish you'd made the right choice. A younger black man, maybe in his 20s, stood up from his seat in row 16. I'm recording too. So is she, he pointed to a Latina woman across from him who had her phone out. This is going everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the news. You think you can cover this up? Gerald's jaw tightened. If passengers do not return to their seats immediately, I will have no choice but to involve law enforcement when we land. Good, Vernon said. I'll be happy to explain to the police why a child was denied medical care. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to comment number 1 if you agree with me. If this was your child, if someone destroyed medication that could save your daughter's life, would you stay calm? Would you sit down and wait? Comment number 1 if you think Loretta has every right to demand this plane land immediately. And while you're at it, hit that like button if you think what Bethany did was not just wrong but criminal. Subscribe because what's about to happen next is going to blow your mind, and I promise you, you do not want to miss it. Now here's the real question that's going to determine everything. Loretta is trapped on a plane with a sick child, surrounded by people who either support her or blame her, and the airline refuses to help. She's alone. Afraid. Furious. But what she doesn't know is that the one person who could stop all of this, the one person with the power to shut it all down, is closer than she thinks. So what happens when the most powerful man on this flight finds out what they did to his family? Stay with me, because the next part of this story will leave you speechless. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet. Passengers returned to their seats, though many kept their phones out, still recording, still documenting. Loretta sank back into her seat, taking Sage from Harriet's arms and pulling her daughter close. Sage was breathing steadily now, her eyes closed, her body slack with exhaustion. Willow curled up against Loretta's other side, her fingers gripping her mother's shirt. Is Sage going to be okay, Mommy? Willow's voice was so small, so frightened. Loretta kissed the top of her head. Yes, baby. She's going to be okay. Mommy promises. But even as she said it, fear gnawed at her. Sage had never had seizures this close together. The medication kept them spaced out, controlled. Without it, anything could happen. Loretta reached for her phone, which was still in airplane mode, and opened her notes app. She began typing furiously, recording every detail while it was fresh. The time Bethany refused to bring water. The moment she crushed the pills. The exact words Gerald had used. Every witness who had spoken up. She would need this. When they landed, when she filed complaints and lawsuits and spoke to the media, she would need every single detail. Harriet came back over, crouching in the aisle beside Loretta's seat. How's she doing? Sleeping. I think she's exhausted. That's normal after a seizure. Her brain needs to recover. Harriet's voice was gentle, but her eyes were hard when she looked toward the front of the cabin where Bethany had disappeared. I've been a nurse for almost 30 years. I've worked in pediatrics, emergency medicine, intensive care. What that woman did is one of the most egregious violations of patient safety I have ever witnessed. Loretta's throat tightened. Why would she do it? I don't understand. I showed her the bottle. I explained everything. Why would she destroy medication a child needs to stay alive? Harriet sighed, and in that sigh was a weariness that came from seeing too much, knowing too much. Honey, you know why. Maybe she doesn't even know she knows, but we both know. Loretta nodded slowly. She did know. She had known from the moment Bethany's eyes swept over her and her daughters with that cold assessment. She had known from the way Bethany's voice changed when she spoke to them versus how warm it was with white passengers. She had known because she had lived this her entire life. Being seen as suspicious. Threatening. Undeserving of basic human consideration. And now her daughter had nearly paid the price for it. I'm so tired, Loretta whispered. I'm just so tired of this. Harriet squeezed her hand. I know. But you're not alone. Every person on this plane who recorded what happened, everyone who spoke up, we're all witnesses. That woman is not going to get away with this. Vernon appeared behind Harriet, his phone now tucked away. Ma'am, I don't think we've been properly introduced. My name is Vernon Hayes. No relation, I assume, given that the odds would be astronomical, but still an interesting coincidence. Despite everything, Loretta felt a flicker of warmth at his attempt to lighten the moment. Loretta Hayes. And these are my daughters, Sage and Willow. Vernon smiled at Willow, who peeked at him shyly. It's very nice to meet you, young lady. You're very brave, you know that. Staying strong for your sister. Willow nodded but did not speak. Vernon's expression turned serious as he looked back at Loretta. I sent the video to my lawyer already. She's going to have a field day with this. I also posted a short clip on Twitter. No faces of your daughters, just audio of what that flight attendant said. It's already been shared a few thousand times. Loretta's eyes widened. A few thousand. Welcome to the age of social media. What happens at 30,000 feet doesn't stay at 30,000 feet anymore. By the time we land, this is going to be everywhere. Loretta did not know if that made her feel better or worse. On one hand, exposure meant accountability. On the other hand, it meant her daughter's trauma would be public, dissected by strangers, turned into content. But maybe that was the price of justice now. Maybe sunlight really was the best disinfectant, even when it burned. A businessman from row 10, a black man in his 40s with expensive-looking glasses, approached carefully. Excuse me, ma'am. I couldn't help but overhear earlier. You mentioned your husband works in aviation. Loretta hesitated. She had not wanted to bring Theo into this, had not wanted to use his position as some kind of shield or threat. She wanted to be heard as a mother, as a human being, not as the wife of someone important. But maybe it was time to stop playing by rules that no one else followed. Yes, she said quietly. He works in aviation. May I ask what he does? Loretta looked down at Sage's sleeping face. He's an executive. Upper management. The man nodded slowly. Then he's going to want to know about this. Does he work for Horizon Atlantic? Loretta's silence was answer enough. The man whistled low. They have no idea what's about to hit them, do they? No, Loretta said, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a small spark of something other than fear and despair. She felt anticipation. No, they really don't. In the back of her mind, Loretta replayed the morning. Theo had kissed her goodbye so early, before the girls even woke up. Big meetings today, love. Flying out first thing. I'll text you when I land. He had not said where he was flying. Had not mentioned which flight. Theo was always so careful about operational security, about not mixing his personal life with his professional one. But now Loretta wondered. She pulled out her phone again, looked at their last text exchange from early that morning. Taking the girls to LA today. Wish you were here. His response, sent an hour before her flight, time stamped while she was going through security, sorry love. Big meeting today. Can't talk. Love you all. See you in LA tonight. See you in LA tonight. He was going to be in LA tonight. Which meant he was traveling today. Which meant he was on a plane. The probability that they were on the same flight seemed impossible, astronomical even. But Horizon Atlantic was Theo's airline, and this was one of their flagship routes. And Theo had a habit of doing surprise inspections, of flying incognito to see how the crew operated when they did not know the CEO was watching. Loretta's heart began to beat faster. What if? No. It was impossible. Except Theo had seemed distracted lately. Preoccupied with something he would not talk about. And he always made time to say goodbye to the girls properly before a trip. This morning he had been gone before dawn. Like he was trying to avoid questions. Like he had somewhere to be that he did not want to explain. Loretta shook her head. She was grasping at straws, seeing patterns where there were none, because she was desperate for someone to swoop in and fix this. Theo was not here. He could not help her. She was on her own. But even as she thought it, even as she tried to push the hope down, a tiny voice in the back of her mind whispered. What if? The plane had been in the air for 2 hours when Sage woke up. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy, and she looked up at Loretta with confusion. Mommy? I'm here, baby. How do you feel? Sage's face scrunched up. My head hurts. A lot. Loretta's heart sank. The headache was back. Worse than before. I know, sweetheart. Try to rest, okay? We'll be on the ground soon, and then we'll get you to a doctor. Sage nodded, but tears were already forming in her eyes. Mommy, I'm scared. I know. I know you are. But Mommy's right here. I'm not going anywhere. Willow reached over and took her sister's hand. I'm here too, Sage. We're both here. For 10 minutes, Loretta tried everything. She dimmed the overhead light. She pulled down the window shade. She spoke in a soft, soothing voice, rubbing small circles on Sage's back. But she could see it happening. The way Sage's eyes began to lose focus. The way her breathing changed, becoming rapid and shallow. The way her small hands clenched into fists. No, Loretta whispered. No, please, not again. And then Sage's body went rigid. Her back arched, her arms shot out, and the seizure took her. This time it was worse. So much worse. Sage's entire body convulsed, her head snapping back with such force that Loretta barely managed to cradle it before it hit the seat. Willow screamed, a high, piercing sound that cut through the cabin. Mommy! Sage is shaking again. Make it stop. Harriet was there in seconds, dropping to her knees in the aisle. Turn her on her side. Support her head. Don't try to hold her down. Loretta obeyed, her hands shaking so badly she could barely control them. Sage's body jerked and thrashed, her legs kicking, her arms flailing. Other passengers stood up, crowding into the aisle, some trying to help, others just staring in horror. Vernon pushed through the crowd. "Get the flight attendants. Now." A younger flight attendant, a woman Loretta had not seen before, rushed over. She took one look at Sage and went pale. "Oh my God. What do we do?" Harriet looked up at her, her voice sharp and commanding. "You get the medical kit and you call for an emergency landing. This child is in status epilepticus. If this seizure doesn't stop in the next few minutes, she could die." The flight attendant ran. The seizure continued. 1 minute. 2. 3. Sage's face was turning blue, her lips dusky, her breathing labored. Loretta was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. "Please, God, please. Don't take my baby. Don't take her from me." Willow clung to Loretta's arm, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Vernon had his phone out again, recording, but his face was grim. This was no longer just about accountability. This was about survival. At the 4-minute mark, the seizure finally began to slow. Sage's convulsions lessened, her body gradually going limp. When it stopped, she did not wake up. She just lay there, unconscious, her chest rising and falling in shallow, irregular breaths. Harriet checked her pulse, her face grave. "Her pulse is weak and thready. She needs oxygen. She needs a hospital. This plane needs to land right now." The younger flight attendant came back with a small red medical kit. Harriet tore it open, pulling out a pediatric oxygen mask. She fitted it over Sage's face, turning on the small portable tank. "This will help, but it's not enough. Where's the emergency landing?" "I don't know," the flight attendant said, her voice shaking. "Gerald said we're continuing to LA. Harriet's head snapped up. "What?" Gerald appeared, walking down the aisle with measured steps, his face set in an expression of bureaucratic annoyance. "We are not diverting this aircraft. We're 35 minutes from LAX. Paramedics will meet us at the gate." Vernon stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Are you insane? That child is dying." "She's not dying," Gerald said coldly. "She had a seizure. It stopped. She's breathing. We have medical personnel on the ground standing by. She's unconscious." Harriet shouted. "She's not breathing properly. She needs a hospital. And she'll get one. In 35 minutes. Harriet stood, squaring her shoulders. "I'm a nurse. I'm telling you, as a medical professional, that this child's condition is critical. If you do not land this plane immediately, you are responsible for whatever happens to her." Gerald's expression did not change. "I'm the senior flight attendant on this aircraft. The captain and I have assessed the situation, and we've determined that continuing to LAX is the safest course of action." "Safest for who?" Vernon demanded. "For the airline's bottom line." "For everyone," Gerald said. "Diverting would put us down in an airport with limited medical facilities. LAX has some of the best emergency response teams in the country. The child will receive better care there." It was a lie, and everyone knew it. They were flying over Phoenix right now. Phoenix had excellent hospitals, excellent trauma centers. This was about money. About schedules. About not wanting to deal with the paperwork and the delays and the angry passengers who would blame the airline for making them late. Loretta looked up from where she sat, her arms wrapped around Sage's limp body, the oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath her daughter took. She looked at Gerald, and in her eyes was something that went beyond anger, beyond fear. It was judgment. "If my daughter dies," Loretta said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face, "I will make it my life's mission to destroy you. I will destroy this airline. I will take everything from you, the way you're taking everything from me. Do you understand?" Gerald looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. Harriet sat back down beside Loretta, taking her hand. "She's breathing. That's good. We'll keep the oxygen on her. We'll monitor her. And the second we land, we'll get her to a hospital. What if we don't have 35 minutes? Loretta whispered. What if she stops breathing? Then I'll do CPR until we land. I promise you, I will not let her die. Loretta nodded, but inside she felt something breaking. Some fundamental belief in the goodness of the world, in the idea that people would help when you needed them most. That belief was shattering, piece by piece, 30,000 feet above the ground. And then, impossibly, the plane began to slow. The angle of descent changed. The engines throttled back. Passengers looked at each other in confusion. Vernon pulled out his phone, checking the flight path app he had running. His eyes widened. We're descending. We're turning. The intercom crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are making an unscheduled landing at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport due to a medical emergency. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We'll be on the ground in approximately 8 minutes. The cabin erupted. Some passengers cheered. Others groaned. The businessman who had complained earlier threw up his hands in disgust. But Loretta did not care about any of them. She looked down at Sage's face, at the oxygen mask covering her daughter's nose and mouth, and she whispered, "Hold on, baby. Just hold on. Help is coming." But even as she said it, she wondered. Who had authorized the landing? Gerald had just told them they were not diverting. The captain had agreed. So what changed? And then she heard it. The sound of the cockpit door opening. And everything changed. Theodore Hayes stepped out of the cockpit, and the air in the cabin seemed to shift. He was tall, over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, his dark skin contrasting sharply with the crisp white shirt and black vest he wore. In his hand was an iPad, and on his face was an expression that would have made lesser people run for cover. Every eye in the cabin turned to him. Passengers who had been arguing fell silent. Flight attendants froze. And Loretta, holding her unconscious daughter, looked up and felt her entire world tilt on its axis. Theo. The word came out as barely a whisper, but in the sudden silence of the cabin, everyone heard it. Willow's head snapped up. She let out a sob and launched herself out of her seat, running down the aisle. Daddy! Theo dropped to one knee, catching his daughter as she collided with him, wrapping his arms around her. I'm here, baby girl. Daddy's here. He looked over Willow's head, his eyes finding Loretta, then dropping to Sage's limp form in her arms. His face went from controlled anger to something raw and devastating. He stood, lifting Willow with him, and walked down the aisle toward his family. Bethany, who had been standing near the galley trying to make herself invisible, stepped forward without thinking. Sir, you need to return to the cockpit. Passengers are not allowed. Theo turned his head slowly, fixing her with a look that made her words die in her throat. Who are you? His voice was quiet, but it carried weight like a judge's gavel. I'm Bethany Whitmore. I'm a flight attendant on this aircraft. No, Theo said. What I asked is who are you to tell me what I can and cannot do on my own airline. The words hung in the air. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. Bethany's face went from pale to gray. Your airline. Theo took a step closer to her. My name is Theodore Hayes. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Horizon Atlantic Airlines. This is my plane. These are my employees. And that, he pointed to where Loretta sat with Sage, is my family. My wife. My daughters. So I'll ask you again. Who are you to tell me anything? Bethany stumbled backward, her hand going to her mouth. I didn't know. You didn't know. Theo's voice rose, filling the cabin with a fury that made people flinch. You didn't know she was my daughter. And if she wasn't? If she was just some random black child, would destroying her medication have been acceptable then? Is that what you're telling me? I was following protocol, Bethany said, but her voice was shaking. I was just doing my job. Your job, Theo repeated. Your job is to ensure passenger safety. Your job is to provide professional, compassionate service to everyone on this aircraft regardless of the color of their skin. Your job is not to play doctor, judge medication you are not qualified to assess, and certainly not to destroy a child's prescribed anti-epileptic drugs. He pulled out his iPad, swiping across the screen. I've been listening to the cabin audio feed for the last hour. It's a feature we have on all our aircraft for training and safety purposes. I heard every word you said to my wife. I heard you refuse her request for water. I heard you destroy my daughter's medication. And I watched, through the cabin camera feed, as my 7-year-old daughter had not one but 2 seizures because of your actions. Bethany sank into a seat, her face in her hands. She was crying now, great shaking sobs. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Theo looked at her without pity. You didn't mean for it to happen. You just meant to teach a black woman her place. You just meant to show her that you had power and she didn't. You just meant to punish her for daring to question your authority. And my daughter nearly died because of it. He turned away from Bethany as if she no longer existed and went to Loretta. He knelt beside her seat, still holding Willow on his hip, and reached out to touch Sage's face. Baby girl, he whispered. Daddy's here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Loretta could not speak. She could only stare at him, tears streaming down her face. Theo leaned in and kissed her forehead, then Sage's, then took Willow's hand. I've got you now. All of you. No one is going to hurt you. I promise. He stood, and when he turned back to the cabin, his face had shifted from anguish back to cold authority. He looked at Gerald, who had been standing frozen near the front galley. You're suspended, effective immediately. When we land, you'll surrender your badge and escort yourself off the property. Gerald's face turned red. Mr. Hayes, I was just following company policy. We were less than 30 minutes from LAX. Company policy, Theo said, is to prioritize passenger safety above all else. You were informed by a medical professional that this child was in critical condition. You were told that she needed emergency intervention. And you refused to act because you didn't want to deal with the inconvenience. That's not policy. That's negligence. He looked at Bethany. You're fired. I want your badge and your uniform shirt before we deplane. Security will escort you out, and our legal team will be in contact. I suggest you hire a lawyer. Bethany let out a wail. Please, Mr. Hayes. I have a family. I have a mortgage. I made a mistake. Please don't do this. You made a choice, Theo corrected. A choice to treat my wife and daughter as if they were criminals. A choice to destroy medication. A choice to stand by while a child seized. And now you get to live with the consequences. He raised his voice so the entire cabin could hear. I want to address everyone on this aircraft. My name is Theodore Hayes, and I am the CEO of this airline. What happened today is unacceptable. It does not represent the values we claim to uphold. I have seen the videos. I know many of you documented what happened. I'm asking you to send those videos to our corporate office. We are conducting a full investigation, and every person who witnessed this will be interviewed. If you're willing to provide a statement, please speak to our staff before you deplane. Vernon stood up from his seat. Mr. Hayes, I recorded the whole thing. I'd be happy to provide my footage and testify to what I saw. Harriet raised her hand. I'm a nurse. I'll provide a medical statement about the child's condition and the negligence I witnessed. One by one, passengers stood. Black, white, Latino, Asian. People who had been strangers an hour ago, now united by what they had witnessed. They would all bear witness. Theo nodded to each of them. Thank you. Your courage in speaking up makes a difference. He looked down at Loretta again. The paramedics are meeting us at the gate. They'll take Sage straight to Phoenix Children's Hospital. It's one of the best pediatric facilities in the country. I'll be with you every step of the way. Loretta finally found her voice. How did you know? How were you even on this plane? Surprise inspection, Theo said. I've been concerned about the quality of service on this route. I wanted to see how the crew operated without knowing I was watching. I was in the cockpit, listening to the cabin feed, when I heard Bethany refuse to help you. I almost came out then. But I wanted to see how far it would go. I wanted to see if anyone would step in. I wanted proof of exactly what was happening on my airline. He looked away, his jaw tight. I was wrong to wait. I should have stopped it immediately. I'm sorry, Loretta. I should have protected you. Loretta reached up and took his hand. You're here now. That's what matters. The plane touched down at Phoenix Sky Harbor 8 minutes later. The landing was smooth, professional, but the moment the wheels hit the tarmac, Sage stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened. Daddy? Theo leaned in close. Right here, princess. You're safe. We're on the ground, and there are doctors waiting to take care of you. As the plane taxied to the gate, an ambulance could be seen through the windows, lights flashing. The moment the plane stopped, paramedics boarded. They were efficient, gentle, asking questions as they checked Sage's vitals and loaded her onto a small stretcher. Theo and Loretta followed them off the plane, Willow holding her father's hand. Behind them, passengers filed off in silence, many stopping to speak with airline representatives who were already gathering statements. Bethany walked off the plane alone, her eyes red, her uniform shirt folded over her arm, escorted by 2 security officers. She did not look back. Gerald followed, his face expressionless, but his hands were shaking. And the plane, which had carried so much pain and injustice, sat empty at the gate, a metal shell waiting for its next journey, for its next opportunity to carry people across the sky, to be a witness to the best and worst of human nature. Phoenix Children's Hospital was a sprawl of modern buildings and carefully landscaped gardens designed to ease the fears of sick children and terrified parents. Sage was rushed into the emergency department, where a team of doctors and nurses descended on her with practiced efficiency. Loretta and Theo were ushered into a private waiting room, Willow between them, all 3 holding onto each other like lifelines. A doctor came out 30 minutes later. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled back into a ponytail. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes. I'm Dr. Ramona Chen. Your daughter is stable. We've given her medication to prevent further seizures, and we're running tests to make sure there's no lasting damage from the prolonged seizure activity. Loretta felt her knees buckle with relief. Theo caught her, holding her up. Can we see her? In a few minutes. She's sleeping right now, which is good. Her brain needs rest. But I want to be very clear with you. What happened today was extremely serious. Status epilepticus can cause permanent brain damage. Your daughter is lucky. Very lucky. Lucky, Loretta repeated, the word bitter in her mouth. She's lucky that her father happens to be the CEO of an airline. What about all the other black mothers whose children are treated this way? Are they lucky? Dr. Chen's expression tightened. No. They're not. And what happened to your family is inexcusable. I've already filed a mandatory report with Child Protective Services, not because I think you did anything wrong, but because what happened on that plane constitutes medical neglect by the airline staff. There will be an investigation. Theo nodded. Good. There should be. They were allowed into Sage's room a few minutes later. She looked so small in the hospital bed, and 4 in her arm, monitors beeping softly around her. But her eyes were open, and when she saw her family, she smiled. Hi, Mommy. Hi, Daddy. Loretta rushed to her side, taking her hand carefully, mindful of the 4. Hi, baby. How do you feel? Tired. And my head hurts a little. But better. Willow climbed onto the bed, curling up next to her sister. I was so scared, Sage. I thought you were going to die. I'm okay, Sage said. Daddy stopped the plane. Daddy did stop the plane, Loretta agreed, looking at Theo. He stopped the whole plane for you. Over the next 3 hours, while Sage slept and woke and slept again, Theo made phone calls. Lots of phone calls. First to his legal team. I want a full internal investigation. Every employee on that flight, every supervisor who trained Bethany Whitmore, every policy that allowed this to happen. I want it all documented. Then to his HR department. Bethany Whitmore is terminated for cause. Gerald Patterson is suspended pending investigation. I want a review of our hiring and training practices, specifically regarding racial bias and discrimination. Then to his head of public relations. Put out a statement. Acknowledge what happened. Apologize. Make it clear that this does not represent our values and that we're taking immediate action. And schedule a press conference for tomorrow. I'll be speaking personally. And finally, to his board of directors. We have a problem. A serious problem. And we're going to fix it, even if it costs us millions. When he hung up from that last call, Loretta looked at him. Millions? Theo sat down beside her, exhaustion written across his face. We're going to implement mandatory anti-bias training for every single employee. Flight attendants, pilots, gate agents, everyone. We're hiring an external diversity consultant to audit our practices. We're setting up a passenger advocacy line that goes directly to an independent ombudsman. And we're creating a fund to compensate any passenger who has experienced discrimination on our flights. Loretta stared at him. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. What happened today happened on my watch. On my airline. I won't let it happen again. Later that evening, when both girls were asleep, Sage in the hospital bed and Willow on a cot the nurses had brought in, Loretta and Theo stepped out into the hallway. They stood by a window overlooking the city, lights twinkling in the gathering darkness. I should have been there, Theo said quietly. I should have been sitting next to you, holding your hand. Instead, I was hiding in a cockpit, treating my family like they were strangers. You didn't know we were on the plane. I should have asked which flight you were taking. I should have told you I was doing an inspection. I kept it secret because I wanted it to be a surprise, wanted to see the operation without anyone knowing I was watching. And because of that, you went through hell. Loretta leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. You came when it mattered. You stopped the plane. You saved our daughter. You saved her first, Theo said. You fought for her when everyone told you to sit down and be quiet. You refused to let them ignore her. You're the hero in this story, not me. Meanwhile, in a small apartment across town, Bethany Whitmore sat on her couch, staring at her phone. The video Vernon had posted had gone viral. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. Her name was everywhere, trending on Twitter, dissected on cable news, turned into a hashtag. She had received hundreds of messages. Death threats. Wishes that she would lose everything. Promises that her life was over. And the worst part was, she could not even argue that they were wrong. She had done it. She had destroyed that little girl's medication. She had let her biases, her assumptions, her need to be in control, override her basic human compassion. And now a child had nearly died because of it. Bethany's phone rang. Her husband. She answered, her voice hollow. I saw the news, he said. Beth, what were you thinking? I don't know, she whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was following the rules. You destroyed a kid's medication. That's not following rules. That's... He trailed off. I know what it is. Bethany closed her eyes. Am I a racist? Is that what I am? Her husband was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I don't know. But I think you need to figure that out. The call ended. Bethany sat in the darkness of her living room and cried. The next morning, Theodore Hayes held a press conference in the lobby of Horizon Atlantic's headquarters. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Theo stood at a podium, Loretta beside him, and faced the scrutiny of the world. Yesterday, something unacceptable happened on one of our flights, he began. My wife and daughters were treated with disrespect, prejudice, and cruelty by members of my staff. My 7-year-old daughter was denied medical care because a flight attendant made assumptions based on the color of her skin. And my daughter nearly died because of it. He paused, letting the words sink in. I take full responsibility. This happened on my airline. Under my leadership. And I am committed to ensuring it never happens again. Effective immediately, Horizon Atlantic Airlines is implementing comprehensive anti-bias training for all employees. We are hiring an independent diversity consultant to review and reform our policies. We are creating a passenger advocacy line for anyone who experiences discrimination. And we are setting aside $10 million to compensate passengers who have been harmed by discriminatory practices on our flights. A reporter shouted a question. What about the flight attendant? What happens to her? Bethany Whitmore has been terminated, Theo said. Legal action is pending. And the other passengers who witnessed it? Many have provided statements. Their courage in speaking up is commendable. This is how change happens. When people refuse to look away. Another reporter, your wife and daughter, are they okay? Theo looked at Loretta, and she stepped up to the microphone. My daughter is recovering. She's strong. But what happened to us happens to black families every day in this country. On planes, in stores, in schools, in hospitals. We're seen as threats. As problems. As less than human. And it needs to stop. Her voice broke, but she kept going. I'm speaking up not just for my daughter, but for every mother who has had to fight this fight. For every child who has been treated like they don't matter. We matter. Our lives matter. And we will not be silent anymore. 3 months later, the Hayes family stood in the Atlanta airport again. Same terminal, different gate, different energy. Sage and Willow were dressed in matching dresses, their hair in neat braids, backpacks decorated with glittery butterflies on their backs. Loretta held both their hands, and this time, Theo was beside her. They were flying to Los Angeles for a vacation. A real one. No meetings, no work, just family time at Disneyland, which Willow had been talking about non-stop for weeks. Are you nervous? Theo asked Loretta quietly as they waited to board. Loretta looked down at Sage, who was chattering excitedly with her sister, no trace of fear in her eyes. A little. But mostly, I'm ready. We can't let what happened stop us from living. The boarding call came. They walked down the jetway, the girls skipping ahead. When they entered the aircraft, a flight attendant greeted them. She was a black woman in her 30s with a warm smile and intelligent eyes. Her name tag read Rochelle. Welcome aboard, Rochelle said. Is there anything I can get for you today? Loretta hesitated, old fear trying to resurface. Then she squared her shoulders. Just some water, please. For my daughter's medication. Rochelle's smile widened. Of course. I'll bring it right over. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. And Mrs. Hayes? Thank you. Because of your family, things are changing. For all of us. Loretta felt tears prick her eyes. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They found their seats, first class this time, a gift from Theo, though Loretta had protested that they did not need special treatment. It's not special treatment, Theo had said. It's me wanting my family to be comfortable. Sage sat by the window, Willow in the middle, Loretta and Theo on the aisle across from them. Rochelle brought water in actual glass cups, not plastic, and waited patiently while Sage took her medication. All good? She asked. Sage nodded, smiling. All good. As the plane pushed back from the gate and began to taxi, Loretta looked around the cabin. It was full of people of all colors, all backgrounds, all stories. Strangers sharing space in a metal tube hurtling through the sky. And for the first time in 3 months, she did not feel afraid. She felt hopeful. The plane lifted off, climbing into the brilliant blue Atlanta sky, and Sage pressed her face to the window, watching the city fall away beneath them. "Mommy, look. We're flying." "Yes, baby," Loretta said. "We're flying." Theo reached across the aisle and took Loretta's hand. She squeezed back, and they sat like that, connected, as the plane leveled off and the flight attendants began their service. An hour into the flight, Sage fell asleep against the window, peaceful and safe. Willow watched a movie on the seatback screen, giggling at something the cartoon characters did. And Loretta leaned back in her seat, closed her eyes, and finally, let herself relax. Vernon, the man who had recorded everything, had stayed in touch. He had testified at the formal investigation. He had spoken at a conference on racial justice in aviation. He had used his platform to make sure Sage's story was not forgotten. Harriet, the nurse, had done the same. She had submitted a detailed medical report documenting Bethany's negligence. She had spoken to hospital boards about implicit bias in emergency care. She had become an advocate. And Bethany? She had disappeared from public view. But Loretta had heard through lawyers that she had enrolled in a program on racial reconciliation. That she was trying, in her own broken way, to understand what she had done and why. Loretta did not know if she would ever forgive Bethany. Forgiveness was complicated, earned, not given freely. But she hoped that Bethany would learn. Would grow. Would never again let her biases hurt another child. The plane touched down at LAX 3 hours later, smooth and uneventful. As they disembarked, Rochelle stood by the exit, saying goodbye to passengers. When the Hayes family reached her, she handed Loretta a card. "If you ever need anything, on any flight, you call me directly. That's my personal number." Loretta looked at the card, then at Rochelle. "Thank you." "No," Rochelle said. "Thank you. You changed things. You made it safer for all of us." Outside the airport, Los Angeles sunshine poured down, warm and bright. Theo hailed a car, and they piled in, the girls already arguing about which ride they wanted to go on first at Disneyland. As the car pulled away from the curb, Loretta looked back at the airport, at the planes taking off and landing, at the constant flow of humanity coming and going. She thought about all the mothers on all those planes, black mothers and brown mothers and mothers of every color, flying with their children, hoping for safety, praying for dignity, fighting battles that should never have to be fought. And she thought about how one voice, one act of refusal to be silent, had stopped a plane. Had changed policies. Had started conversations. Had made the world, in some small way, a little bit better. "What are you thinking about?" Theo asked, watching her face. Loretta smiled. "I'm thinking that we're not just flying anymore. We're soaring. And we're never looking back. Now let me ask you this, because your voice matters in this conversation. Do you think what happened to the Hayes family could happen to you or someone you love? Have you ever witnessed discrimination like this and wished you had spoken up? Comment down below and share your story, because every story matters, every voice counts. If you believe that no family should ever have to fight this hard for basic human dignity, smash that like button. If you think airlines and companies everywhere need to do better, need to be held accountable, hit subscribe because we're going to keep telling these stories, keep shining light on injustice, keep fighting for change. And share this video. Share it with your family, your friends, your co-workers, because the only way things change is when enough people say enough is enough. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about Sage and Willow and Loretta and every family that has walked this painful road. May we all have the courage to stop the plane when injustice takes flight. May we all be witnesses. May we all speak up. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and remember that your voice has power. Use it. God bless, and safe travels to you all. This story teaches us that systemic racism doesn't always wear a hood or shout slurs. Sometimes it wears a uniform and speaks in the language of protocol. Bethany Whitmore likely didn't wake up that morning planning to harm a child, but her unconscious biases, her assumptions about black families, her need to exert authority over someone she perceived as other, nearly cost Sage her life. The lesson here is clear: silence in the face of injustice makes us complicit. Vernon, Harriet, and the other passengers who spoke up became part of the solution. They used their phones, their voices, their willingness to be uncomfortable, to document wrong and demand right. We also learn that change requires more than individual accountability. Theodore Hayes didn't just fire one employee. He restructured an entire system, invested millions in training, and created mechanisms for ongoing accountability. Real change happens when institutions acknowledge their failures and commit resources to fix them. Finally, this story reminds us that our children are watching. Sage and Willow will remember not just the trauma of that flight, but also their mother's courage, their father's intervention, and the strangers who refused to look away. We teach the next generation how to fight injustice by fighting it ourselves, right now, wherever we encounter it. Have you ever witnessed racism and wished you'd had the courage to speak up like Vernon did? Have you stayed silent when you knew something was wrong? Drop a comment and tell me about a time you stood up for what's right, or a time you wish you had. Your story matters. If this video made you angry, made you think, made you want to do better, hit that like button hard. Subscribe to this channel because we're not stopping these conversations. We're going to keep telling stories that matter, stories that challenge us, stories that change hearts and minds. And please, share this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who doesn't think racism is still a problem. Share it with your family group chat, your social media, everywhere. Because the more people who see what happened to the Hayes family, the harder it becomes for the next Bethany Whitmore to look away from her own biases. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening with an open heart. Thank you for caring enough to make it to the end. May you always have the courage to stop the plane when injustice takes flight. Stay blessed, stay vigilant, and keep fighting the good fight.